We are in the book of Ecclesiastes. When I study a book or a subject, I like to try to think of a unique title, a different title, and one came to my mind this week as we've been progressing through Ecclesiastes, and it's this: the divine experiment of life. Okay, the divine experiment of life. Solomon is experimenting with life, and he's trying to understand what? Yes, he's trying to determine the meaning of life, the purpose of life, why in the world we're here. And there's a lot of individuals who are living in our world today who don't have a clue. You know what? They're just living their lives for today, and they're not living their lives for any purpose, no true purpose, because they think that once they die, they're just going to what? Die. And so their life is pretty vain and pretty empty. And that's where Solomon is in this particular text. If you weren't here last week and you didn't get the notes that I handed out last week, then you're going to be missing one verse. Okay, Ecclesiastes 1:15. All right, because we're almost ended there last week, and so they had the notes, and so when I ran off the new notes, it didn't have those that 15th verse in there. So you'll be minus one verse, and so it means you're going to have to take notes by hand and not have my notes. All right? But we're in Ecclesiastes 1, verse 15, and Solomon makes this statement: that which is crooked cannot be made straight, and that which is wanting cannot be numbered. Man, what in the world is Solomon talking about? Okay, what is Solomon? What was Solomon's first experiment with? Does anybody remember? What was the first thing he gave his heart to? Nobody remembers. Y'all got to go back and do some reading, guys. Come on now. Okay, it's only been a week. Okay, he says, "I gave my heart to know what? Wisdom." Okay, wisdom. And folks, does the world contain a lot of wisdom? Let me reword the question. Okay, is there a lot that you and I need to come to an understanding about in the world? Yeah. I mean, it's endless, is it not? And we've talked about that. We'll never come to the answer to all questions regarding this world. Why is that? Okay, number one, we're not going to be alive that long. It takes a long time to search it out. But what's another answer? Okay, it's not for man to know everything. We talked about this, the one answer I gave you last week. Folks, who created the world? God did. Okay? And you are never going to come to a total understanding of everything that this God has created. It's going to be impossible. Now, can we come to understand some things? Yes. But are we going to ever understand everything? No, never. Now notice what Solomon says. He says, in this search for wisdom, as I'm giving my heart to know all these things, that which is crooked cannot be what? Be made straight. And that which is wanting cannot be what? Cannot be numbered. Folks, as man explores the world, he ultimately finds that things are not perfect. Isn't that right? Are there a lot of things that are not perfect in our world? Okay. It seems like every time we have one disease and we just about get that one solved and under control, what happens? Another one comes along, and then guess what we have to do? Start all over again. We've got to research, and we've got to study, and we've got to experiment. We've got to do trial and error, don't we? And we've got to talk about it, and we've got to come up with this vaccine and that vaccine. And finally, we get that under control, and we say, whew, very good. And then all of a sudden, here's another one. Folks, man believes that things need to be corrected, don't they? But guess what? The things that are crooked, the things that are wanting, guess what? They will never, ever, ever go away. In the mind of man, a problem demands a what? A solution. That's right. You know, if I see something that's not right, I need to what? Fix it. Okay? That's why women marry men. They see a man, there's a problem, and he needs to be what? Fixed. And you want to know what they find? The crooked cannot be made straight. Have we solved the problem of poverty? You know, does that baffle you? It does me. Why we haven't solved that one problem. Okay? And the reason it baffles me is because look at us. We ain't got no problem with poverty. You know, we ain't got problems with being poor like we can't eat. Look at us. Okay? We got plenty, don't we? You go home and guess what? You open your refrigerator, you open your cupboard, and guess what? You got plenty to eat. In fact, I've got, just look at him. He ain't hurting, don't let him fool you. Okay? That joker right there opened his mouth, I'll give it back to him. Let me ask you this, have we been able to rid the world of natural disasters? We haven't been able to do that, folks. Okay? I don't know when the word climate change came into effect. Okay? It's a pretty recent term. Okay? When I say recent, 20, 30 years max. Okay? Now we had other terms to describe it in the past, right? We had what? Global warming, global cooling before then. But folks, you know, back in the 1800s, back in the 1700s, you know what was happening? Hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes, landslides, unbelievable snowstorms. And guess what we've never been able to do? We have never been able to solve those problems. Never. Are there some diseases that still have no cure whatsoever? Oh, yeah. Just recently, I say recently, it's been probably 8 or 9 months now, one of our neighbors around the corner, he retired. And he was looking forward to his retirement. And then about 3 months later, I see him walking and I say, how things going? You liking retirement? He said, I was just diagnosed with an incurable cancer. Incurable cancer. And he says there's never been one person who has ever lived through this cancer. And he said, but they have found mine in one of the most early stages that you could ever find it. Okay? And so he went through some treatments, started getting better. The doctors thought, well, you know what? He may be the first. You know, he may be the first one that conquers this and gets over it. 3 months later, laid him in the grave. Okay? Nobody has ever been cured of that cancer, folks. Okay? There's some things, you know, the crooked can't be what? Crooked can't be made straight. And notice he says, that which is wanting cannot be numbered. I find it interesting that the wanting never ends, does it? I did a little just looking up about DNA. Okay, is that relatively recent that we've learned about DNA and all of that stuff? Okay, the discovery of DNA was way back in 1869. Okay, that's when they discovered it. But they didn't understand it. They didn't know what in the world it did or didn't do. They found its structure 1953. Folks, that's almost 100 years after the discovery. We find the structure of DNA. And so they put all of this, credence in DNA. You know, we can do this, we can do that, we can manipulate this, we can manipulate that. And then I found out that they found something called junk DNA. Okay? There's some parts of the DNA don't mean nothing. Okay? And that was after they discovered the structure of DNA. Well, so they started touting all this stuff about junk DNA not being needed, junk DNA, you know, doing this and that. And just recently, you know what they found out? Junk DNA serves a purpose in the DNA. Okay? Now we're what? We're just 160 years removed from when they made that discovery about DNA, and we're still doing what? We're still discovering. You see, we have a want and a want and a want and a want to know and know and know and know, and guess what? It seems like we never do come to fully know, do we? And it's so Solomon just states the truth that the crooked cannot be made straight. Notice Ecclesiastes 1:16. I communed with mine own heart, saying, wow. Anybody in here ever talk to yourself? One guy saw a man talking to him and says, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm talking to myself." He said, "Are you crazy?" He says, "No, it's the only intelligent conversation I have all day." Folks, right here Solomon stops, and guess what he does? He reflects. Okay, do we need that period of time to reflect sometime? Yeah, folks, sometimes it's good just to get away from everybody, just to sit down by yourself and just to think. And that's what Solomon is doing. He's reflecting. And notice what he says. Lo, I am come to what? Great estate. Okay? Have we talked about Solomon's kingdom? I got a couple of mild Okay? It's almost like I've never taught y'all. Okay? I just figured, I was like, yeah, we've talked about that. Turn over to 1 Kings for just a minute. It's in your notes. You don't have to do that. I forget, I just gave you everything I wrote. Look at this. This is Solomon's provisions for one day. And Solomon's provisions for one day was 30 measures of fine flour. Not just regular old flour. Fine flour. 80 measures of meal. 10 fat oxen. 20 oxen out of the pastures. 100 sheep. Besides hart, roebucks, fallow deer, and fatted fowl. Folks, that's just for his administration for one day to feed them. Is that a pretty big administration? Solomon says, guess what? I've come to great estate. Okay? Solomon realized how vast and how magnificent his kingdom was. And he didn't discount that whatsoever. Okay? Didn't discount that at all. But notice what else he says. And have gotten more wisdom than all they that have been before me in Jerusalem. Now that phrase, in Jerusalem, is an interesting statement. Okay? Prior to Solomon's coming along, there were a lot of interesting people who occupied some pretty important positions in Jerusalem. Okay? Let me give you the name of one of them. You ready? You sure? Melchizedek. Who is Melchizedek? He was a high priest and he was a king. The Bible says in Salem. Okay, folks? It was Jerusalem. Okay, so here is a man of great power and great wisdom who lived where? In Jerusalem. You continue to read through the Scripture and you'll find another individual by the name of Aruna. And guess what? He was a man of great wisdom as well. And Solomon says, I've got more wisdom than what? Than all the people who have ever occupied a high position in Jerusalem. Wow. Where did David reign? In Jerusalem. You see, even his estate was greater than what? His father, and his wisdom was greater than his father. The Bible says this, and Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the children of the east country, and all the wisdom of Egypt. For he was wiser than all men. Ethan the Ezrahite, and Heman, and Calcol, and Darda, and the sons of Mahal. And his fame was in all nations round about. Man. So he just reflects upon his wisdom and upon his great estate. Notice, go back up to point A there, folks. Reflection's important, isn't it? Here's some things we need to do. We need to look at results. We need to keep the good. We need to get rid of the bad. And we need to do some cost analysis, don't we? Is it worth it? You know, there's some things you can spend a ton of money on, and guess what? It's not really worth it, is it? And there may be a better way to do it. So Solomon just stops for a moment and he just reflects on everything that he has. Wouldn't it be interesting to know all the details about what Solomon did and what he had his court to do for him? Folks, we'd be overwhelmed by the information that was gleaned by those individuals. Okay? Can a king command you to do about whatever he wants you to do? Oh, yeah. You know, if he wants you to, you know, well, let me ask you this. Have you seen some weird experiments go on in our world? Weird things that our government finances. One of the weirdest things I've ever seen on a video was a shrimp running on a treadmill. And that was a government experiment. I don't care how far a shrimp can run on a treadmill, and I don't care about how hard his heart pumps on a treadmill. But there that little shrimp was, just a running, you know. It's unbelievable what money will be spent on.
The new king in England has somebody who squeezes out his tooth. He doesn't even squeeze out the tooth.
Hey, man, that's when you got money, you know. See, that's why you married your wife. She married you to fix you. You married her to squeeze your toothpaste. If you think that's going anywhere, darling, would you squeeze my toothpaste? I could see that fight going on. Man. Ecclesiastes 1:17, and I gave my heart to know wisdom. And to know what? Madness and folly. I perceive that this also is vexation of spirit. Folks, again, I want you to focus in on the fact that Solomon says, I gave my heart to these things. Okay? He wasn't just piddling around. Okay? He was really, he put his all into this stuff. Okay? And he says, I gave my heart to know what? Wisdom. And then he also says, and to know what? Madness and folly. That little word madness comes from a root word that means clamorously foolish, to rave, madness, folly, silliness, folly, foolishness. A word meaning to play the fool. Are there some things people do in our world that when you see them do them, you say, he is stupid? You ever see that? Man, I see that all the time. Okay? He is just plumb dumb. Because I would never, ever do those kind of things. Let me ask you something. When people do crazy, foolish, silly, goofy stuff, and they live through that, do they gain wisdom through the process? Let me tell you what, folks. They have people out there who climb, they can climb mountains, and they have no belay line, nothing. The only thing they use is their fingers and their feet. Okay? If you ever come across a person like that, and you talk to them, let me tell you something. They're not stupid people by any means. You may think they're crazy, okay? And I would never do that. I wouldn't recommend doing that. But these guys know what they're doing. If you want to know how to do it, guess what? They can teach you. They know all the ins. They know all the outs. There's some wisdom that comes from what? Madness and folly. And Solomon knew that. He didn't just give himself to know the things of the world. He said, I even wanted to know the wisdom that comes from what? From madness and folly. That's how badly he wanted wisdom. It's unbelievable. I put down some examples of crazy things. Base jumping, bull riding, bungee jumping. I'd still try that when I think. Okay, I'm one of them stupid people. running with the bulls. Heli-skiing. Does anybody know what that is? Folks, they take you up in a helicopter, 10, 12,000 feet, and they drop you out of that, and you just hope you make it down. Okay? Because there are no paths. You make your own path as you go, and you just hope you don't create a what? An avalanche behind you. Okay? See, I'd never do that. Cliff diving, train surfing. That's big over in England, folks. You know what that is? Yeah, get on top of a train and ride that joker standing up. I might try that. And then the last one, that wing suit flying. Have you seen that? Wing suits, man. You jump off a cliff and, buddy, you just fly. You know where they got the idea for that? Flying squirrels. That's exactly right. If them squirrels can do it, I can do it. Wisdom. Okay? Wisdom from a squirrel. And it's crazy. Yes, sir. I don't know. Probably a rock, I hope. Okay? You remember, what's the movie, Castaway? You know, he wanted to hang himself, but he had that dummy he threw off first. He even griped about the fact he couldn't even kill himself. But the point that Solomon's making is that there's a lot of different places from which wisdom comes. Okay? And wisdom can come from madness and folly. Are there a lot of people who have gone through a lot of bad things, done a lot of silly stuff, and they'll look at you and they'll tell you, don't do that? You ever heard that? And the reason they tell you, don't even start, don't go down that path, is because what? I already have. I've learned what's there, and guess what? You don't want to take that. Folks, Solomon went through it. I'd love to know what he did, wouldn't you? I'd love to know what some of this madness and folly he engaged in. He doesn't tell us, but he says that once he went through it, I perceive that this also is what? Vanity and vexation of spirit. Wow. I want you to think about what he said. You can go out in the world, and you can study the world and gain all the wisdom of this world. And when you get to the end of life, guess what you find? It's just vanity and vexation of spirit. Now, folks, those are smart people, right? These are the educated ones in society. These are the people that go get their degrees and you know, they occupy some prominent positions in the world. And then you've got the other side of wisdom, and these are the crazy people, right? You know, they don't go to school. They just go out and do stupid stuff. Okay? And they gain a lot of wisdom. And Solomon says it doesn't matter which path that you take to gain wisdom, at the end of it all, it's all what? Vanity and vexation of spirit. Folks, there are some things that are more important than the gaining of wisdom, Solomon says. Man, it's hard to believe, isn't it? Now notice verse 18. For in much wisdom is much what? Grief. And he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. I think I'll just stay dumb. Right? If you just pull that verse out of its context and you just read that, you know, don't ever read that to your kids while they're in school, you know. In much wisdom, kids, there's a lot of grief. You get a lot of knowledge, guess what? There's a lot of sorrow. Well, I'm quitting school today, Mom. You know, I want to be happy. Solomon states what I call a hard truth about wisdom, folks. There's power in knowledge, isn't there? Folks, there's power in knowledge. Guarantee you. The more knowledge you get, the better off you are. If you want to teach a kid to move up in a corporation, guess what you teach them? You start on ground level and you learn as much as you possibly can. Right? You talk to as many people as you can. You do as many works in that company as you can. You gain all the skills you can possibly can gain. You take every class that they offer. And guess what? One of these days, you just might be the CEO of that company. Okay? So there's knowledge, there's power in knowledge. But Solomon also says there's what? Grief. Looked up that little word grief, and Strong says vexation. Isn't that interesting? There's vexation in much wisdom. Anger, grief, indignation, provocation, sorrow, spite, wrath. Wow. The definition of sorrow: anguish, affliction, pain. Let me ask you something. Why is it that wisdom and knowledge creates grief and sorrow? Would you really think that? Okay, so what does that mean? Ah. I just wrote down as many things as I could think of, okay? And it wasn't very many. How about this one? Because when we come to understand how much we know, we also understand how much we don't know. You see, when I first begin the process of acquiring wisdom, I think that I can acquire it all, can I? Okay? It's just like studying the Bible. You think, okay, I'm going to study the Bible. I'm going to learn all the Bible that you can possibly learn. And you give your life to it, and you get to where I am after 40 years, and you guess what you know? How stupid you are. How much I still don't know. You know that? And how much I wish I did know. Okay? But you see, you think at the first, oh, I can just gain all this wisdom. But then all of a sudden you gain it all, and now I still realize how much I don't know. How about this one? Because we come to understand the ignorance of others about things and know they will never be able to acquire the knowledge. You ever seen people like that? You take, for instance, me. Folks, I am, and Kathleen will affirm this, I am totally ignorant of medicine, okay, and of medical stuff. Totally. You know, she thinks I ought to know. Okay? You don't know that? That's what she tells me, you know. You don't know that? No, I don't know that. You know, not unless what? Somebody tells me. And you know, so here you are, you know all this stuff. You know Vic don't know all this stuff. And you know what she does? She just cries for me. Poor soul. Now here's what she said. She said, bless his heart. Ah. How about this one? Because after we spent so much time increasing our knowledge and wisdom, we get to the end of it all, and it's just what? Vanity and vexation of spirit. Isn't that sad? You know? You get to the end of life, and you've done all this stuff, and you're sitting in a chair, you're lying in a bed, just waiting to what? To die. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Because the wisdom and knowledge we have obtained has not lessened man's problems, sometimes our wisdom and our knowledge what? Increases man's problems. Okay? Oh, if we'll just get computers, we won't cut down so many trees. You know where we made our mistake? Making printers. You know what? You'll find one error on the page. You know what you'll do? You'll throw a tree away to burn another tree. Won't you? Oh, can't put that out. Got to, you know. We ain't solved a lick of our troubles. Okay? How about this one? Because some do not desire the wisdom that we have. Thus we know that it will only last for a generation and then come to an end. Right? You know, there's some people, folks, they don't care that you know what you know. They don't care that you know about your job. They don't care that you know about this particular person or this group of individuals. And even if you wrote a book on it, even if you wrote an encyclopedia on it, guess what? They don't care. Do your kids always care how much you know? Are you kidding? No, they don't care. You've acquired this knowledge over a lifetime. You try to give it to them, they don't care. It lasts for what? Till you go to the grave? That's sad, isn't it? Because earthly wisdom does not do anything positive, watch this, for spiritual man. Folks, that's sad, isn't it? Here are all these people in all these professions, and they've gleaned a ton of wisdom. And they're out there promoting it, and people are absorbing it, and guess what? It doesn't help their spiritual man one iota. That's sad, isn't it? And much wisdom, there is what? Much grief. We go to chapter 2, and listen to this. I said in mine heart, go to now, I will prove thee with what? Mirth. Y'all need to look that word up before next week. Well, just read my notes, okay? Therefore, enjoy pleasure. And behold, this also is what? Vanity. What did he give in his heart to? Wisdom. Now what's he about to give his heart to? Pleasure. Surely there is benefits in pleasure, isn't there? Finish this statement. The people who work oftentimes live for the blank. What'd you say? They live for the weekend. Right? Because the weekend is when I quit working and I get to involve myself in pleasure. You see our mindset? I can just make it through the week. I get to have what? Fun. Okay? So Solomon now, he's done with this foolishness called wisdom. Let's go to the pleasure side and let's see what it offers. And sadly, he already tells us the end, doesn't he? It's what? It's vanity. We'll talk about it next week. Good stuff, guys. Solomon's a fun book to study.